Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce. I'm back with the W headband because we are here talking about a sweep for the Chicago Cubs. Cubs sweep the Baltimore Orioles in 3 games. They cap it off tonight here on Thursday with a 8-0 win over the O's in Baltimore. Wow. That's all I can start off saying is wow. This is incredible. This is good feelings, this is good vibes, this is whatever you want to call it right now for the Chicago Cubs coming off of this series. Like Jeremiah says, Cubs baseball is back, baby. And it really does feel that way after this series. And it's fun to sit on Twitter throughout the course of X over the course of the week and see the discussions and the the different just thought processes surrounding this team right now. And it really is feeling that way. Everybody's looking at this team and going, is this a repeat of last year? Like, are they getting hot at the right time when it's all said and done? Is this really, really happening again? Because it really, really, really does feel that way. We're going to quickly run through everything that happened in the series, and then we're just going to dive in and really discuss this thing and what happened over the course of the last 3 days. Jeremiah, correct me. I know it's Twitter. I still call it Twitter too. It's like for Chicagoans. X will always be Twitter, as the Willis Tower is always the Sears Tower. That's just the nature of the beast and how it is. And agree with you, Jeremiah. Yeah, just don't blow it in September, though. And we'll get to that here in just a second. But the Cubs over these last 3 games, 9-2 victory on Tuesday night. Jameson Taillon picking up the win. He lowers his ERA below 3. That's going to be a common scenario here after that win. Yesterday, a 4-0 win with Shota Imanaga on the bump. 6 shutout innings from the throwing philosopher and your Cubs all-star representative. He lowers his ERA to a 2.97, also below a 3. Jameson Taillon's a 2.99 for those that are curious. And then today, happy birthday, first off. Big shout out to Justin Steele. Happy birthday, sir, from the entire Cubs on Tap crew. We appreciate you. We cannot wait till the next time you're able to join us here on the airwaves at Cubs on Tap. Happy birthday to Bo as well. Hope the little man had an incredible birthday. And hey, he got to watch Dad throw a hell of a game today. 70 pitches, 7 innings. That's absurd. Justin was ready to run back out there and do this thing all over again and go another complete game after throwing one in the Angels series. And he probably could have. He looked like he could have, but Craig saying, no, you did your job. Drew Smiley, Jorge Lopez come in, get the job done. But an 8-0 win. Justin Steele lowers his ERA to a 2.71 on the season. Also is the best ERA in baseball since May 27th, courtesy of the @Cubs Twitter account. And yes, just like Jeremiah said, you read my mind, Jeremiah. Congrats on his second win, too. The Cubs finally get him another win. A scoreless shutout win at that for Justin Steele on his birthday. That's a pretty good birthday present, if you ask me. Caps off the sweep, and they leave Baltimore with hopefully some crab cakes and a series sweep. And we're going to dive right into this thing because the first piece, cold as steel, philosophical pitching, because that's what this series was. Jameson Taillon was fantastic on Tuesday. It wasn't pretty. Taillon has had some struggles, but I will forever take 6 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned, a walk, and 7 Ks out of Jameson Taillon. Jameson Taillon is pitching exactly like the Cubs need him to right now. And this is a guy that Tyler was happy to sit here and say, hey, maybe he's a guy they sell if this thing continued to go south. He has been pitching that well. And talk about Shota following that up yesterday, right? Steele goes today. He goes his 7, 3 hits, not a single run, not a single walk, 4 Ks. Shota himself goes 6, allows 6 hits, not a single run, only 1 walk and 6 Ks. Cubs starting pitchers walked 2 batters this entire series. That just goes to show how good they've been. And yes, I know the Orioles don't take a lot of walks. It was mentioned time and time again over the course of the series, but when you can get a good baseball team like the Baltimore Orioles to sit back on their heels and just swing and miss at just about anything, it's going to play in your favor. And great stat here from Jeremiah. The O's have only been shut out 5 times this year, and the Cubs are responsible for 2 of those. I think even more impressive, and they announced it on the Marquee Sports Network broadcast during the end of this game, this is the first time that the Orioles have been swept in a game of greater than 2, or a series, pardon me, of greater than 2 games since August of 2021 at home, that is. That is 71 series at home in that time span. For reference, Frank Schwindel, Patrick Wisdom were like the faces of the Cubs at the end of 2021. Chris Bryant was a Giant, Anthony Rizzo was a Yankee, and Javier Baez was a New York Met. That was the last time against the Tampa Bay Rays that Baltimore got swept in a lengthy series like this of 3 games at home in their own ballpark. This could very well be, when we look back on it in hindsight at the end of the year, this could be the series that everybody turns around and looks at and says, that was the difference maker. That series was ultimately the difference maker for these Chicago Cubs, because everything was clicking in this scenario. Every single thing was clicking in this series. But most importantly, these were 3 consecutive quality starts from your starting pitchers that did not go wasted. How often have we sat here at Cubs on Tap? Have you guys that joined us in the comment section sat here and moaned and bitched about it? How many times have we sat here and had this discussion about the pitching being wasted? Pretty much all season. This has been a recurring trend all year long until this series. They took care of business, and the starting pitching has been where it started for this team the whole year. It's been their greatest strength. It's been their backbone for virtually the entire campaign so far. And they take care of business and actually reward their starting pitching. Tyler says here, hand up, I have run. Yeah. And I think it's been crazy. I know we've all sat here and bitched and moaned about it, but not this series. Not today. The Cubs take care of business on the starting pitching front. Things you love to see. And you know what? We'll follow that up. I mean, talk about how good the bullpen was in this series too, right? I mean, we saw some really, really good performances over the course of this series. We got to see Tyson Miller. We got to see Mark Leiter Jr. in his return, and we got to see the debut of Hunter Biggie in this series on night number 1. Biggie closed that game out, picked up his first professional strikeout, 100-mile-per-hour fastball at the bottom of the zone. Just absolutely gross to top things off. The bullpen is starting to settle in too. Then yesterday, Little comes out, although he makes it interesting. I believe it was Tyler, ironically, Mr. Edmonds here in our group chat, that called him the left-handed Dylan Maples, was the analogy used by Tyler. But Porter Hodge comes on for an inning and a third. Talk about a guy like him who's been in high leverage situations and producing in those roles. And then Hector Neris comes in and shuts things down. He did give up a hit, but the nervous narrative, try saying that 10 times fast, has slowly started to dwindle and die. And again, we talked about a little bit already. Smiley gets through a clean inning with just the 1 hit. And Lopez, despite giving up a hit and a walk, fans to close the thing down. I mean, this pitching in this series was fantastic. And it feels like this bullpen is finally starting to find somewhat of a groove. It feels like this bullpen's turned over 10 freaking times too in the process. And you look at the IL and what's coming back as well in that bullpen. Julian Merriweather's already throwing rehab stints at Iowa. He looked really, really good, touching, I think they said 97, 98 with the fastball already. You add on to that, Caleb Killian down in South Bend has looked really good. He's touched 100 coming off of that injury back in spring training. I believe it's the teres major strain was the term. It's a muscle in your back. It's like right around here. When you got a scratch and you can get it with your own hand, that's right about where your teres major is. He's coming back. I mean, imagine adding those two high leverage arms into this bullpen right now to go along with some of these guys that have been pitching very, very well, like a Porter Hodge, like a Neris, who has seemed to rebound after his little bit of a break and a time off. It is really, really starting to get to a point where this pitching is becoming reliable on both fronts. And largely, it feels like the bullpen's only going to get better because there are key contributors that are going to be coming back into this pen sooner rather than later. A couple of quick comments here. I do want to give some love to those that are jumping in. I know we've got a lot of Jeremiah comments in here tonight, which is always a lot of fun. He says, I'm getting 2021 nostalgia, man. We're getting old. Hey, you're preaching to me, brother. Let me tell you. Sean Gardner says, can the Cubs be buyers now? We're going to talk about that a little bit later here in the show and what that means, I think, coming up for the future. Maybe even a little bit of a hot take coming up on that as well. Jeremiah says, good offense, good pitching equals wins. Who knew? Wouldn't know. Not us, not Cubs fans. We wouldn't know, certainly the way things have been going. And finally, Darren says here, focus trade deadline on catcher, a third baseman with control. Secondary choice would be a bullpen arm. Leave Michael Busch at first base. And I think that is a great segue from you guys into my next segment of what I wanted to discuss here on this show tonight. And it's happening. Crack 'em with a Busch. I'm trying to get as much name play as I humanly can off of these two guys. But let me tell you right now, Happ and Busch have single-handedly carried this offense. And I'm going to get some numbers here for you guys to support that claim. Over the last 30 games, both Ian Happ and Michael Busch, I believe, are 950 OPS players. I mean, shit, Michael Busch in the last 30 games is slashing 347, 431, 564. I'm not good at quick math, but I'll quick math some quick math and tell you that that's really fucking good. Like, that is outer worldly numbers from a guy like Michael Busch. That's a 995 OPS, just shy of a 1,000 OPS out of Michael Busch over the last 13. In that time frame as well, 15 walks, 13 runs driven in, 4 homers, 18 runs scored. He has been scorching hot. And with tonight's game, another 2 hits tonight, had a homer in this series as well. That was a dinger pick for Ron Luce. We got into double digits. Thank you much. He is up to a 278, 369. Nice. 369 is a great number. And if you know, 484 slash line, that's an 853 OPS on the season. Now, Michael Busch, statistically, and I saw this on the old Twitter app as well, he is the 3rd best first baseman in baseball by WRC plus standards. The only guys better are Bryce Harper's one of them, and I couldn't even tell you who the other name was because I didn't pay enough attention to care. Michael Busch has been really good. And Michael Busch is a name I've been banging the drum for all year, and people have been getting, well, he can't be the Cubs' best hitter. Why can't he be? Why can't he be? And the reason I ask that question is this. Michael Busch, coming into this season, was largely an unknown commodity, but was a top, 55 prospect in baseball? Eventually, your stars come from developing prospects, right? So why can't Michael Busch develop into a star that can be a major cog in this lineup? And I understand a large reason why people get the way they've gotten with that. It is because of, saying, oh, well, he can't be that because Bellinger's getting paid $27 million and Dansby Swanson's making $27 million and Happ and Suzuki are making over $20 million. I get that. I totally understand that piece. But when you can get a guy who is effectively a homegrown talent of sorts, right? I mean, he barely played for the Dodgers a season ago. To come up and have the type of production and just, almost magical start to his season so far, reminding people why he was a top prospect in baseball, it really starts to give me that feeling of, maybe Michael Busch is the guy that can help propel this team into the future. We saw Seiya Suzuki and Cody Bellinger do this down the stretch for the Cubs team a year ago when they clawed their way back into playoff contention around the trade deadline. Why can't Michael Busch be that guy? Why can't he be the guy of the future that is a bat no matter where you play him, whether it's second base on a weird off day, first base, DH, maybe he plays a little bit of third base again, which he's played at times. Why can't he be a key cog in this lineup for the future? And I love this comparison by Jeremiah. Jeremiah, I think it might have been you as well. I'm not going to quote myself. I'll have to go back and find some, clip in an old show. But this comparison's been made before about Michael Busch of like, well, maybe he could be a young Freddie Freeman, right? Where the slug wasn't quite there yet, but he hits a lot of doubles and he drives and runs and he gets on base. Like Michael Busch is very much playing that way right now with this, this Cubs lineup. And I love him in that 2-hole right now. I think that was one of the best decisions by Craig Counsell, was just to finally say, hey, he's hot. And I want to get him as many at-bats as we physically can. I think he meshes so well with the rest of that lineup being in the 2-hole right now. And I think, since Suzuki went down initially at the beginning of the season, he's been the most consistent player in that 2-hole as well from a production standpoint. And I think that's just an incredibly, incredibly key thing to keep an eye on. And Jeremiah says he meant the other guy with the top 3 WRC plus is Freddie Freeman. Appreciate that clarification. But I still think that stands. Like that has been made as a comparison on this show of Michael Busch to like a young Freddie Freeman. That has been made once before. Again, I can't tell you what show it happened on because we do so many of these, but that was a comparison that was made earlier in the year, and it's getting kind of crazy. Hank says this team's making him feel like Al Pacino in Godfather 3. I'll tell you what, it gets even better than that. If you want me to keep rattling your noggin, pardon me, with some crazy stats and crazy numbers, because we got another one of the hottest players in baseball for this Cubs team, scorching in at a 992 OPS over the last 30 games, Ian Happ. Ian Happ is that guy. Ian Happ is a guy that I've continued to bang the drum for. We just talked about it on the last show, that I've liked him in that 5-hole. He's been very consistent since getting to that spot. And he's finally becoming the run producer I think that the Cubs were hoping he could become. He is on an absolute tear right now. Obviously, the 3-run homers, if he continues to get those, are going to continue to help him at a humongous clip. But 56 RBIs on the season, 29 of those RBIs have come in the last 30 games. I mean, he is an RBI per game guy right now at this pace. 8 homers, 21 walks in that time span, a 274, 02, 590 slash line, and he's only hotter in recent games. The last 15, he's well over a 1,200 OPS. And in the last 7 games, he's well over a 1,300 OPS. He has been on absolute fire right now. And largely, this lineup has been mostly carried by Happ and Busch of late. Obviously, this series, we got to see Seiya Suzuki have a really good game. 3 extra base hits tonight in the win on Thursday against these Baltimore Orioles. His first career game of that kind of stat line. You're starting to see these guys heat up at the right time. Not only Seiya Suzuki, Dansby Swanson looks like he's starting to hit a little bit. Gets a big home run tonight in the win on Thursday as well. Almost had another one earlier in the game that he poked out to left center and it almost got out. It only missed by a couple of feet. These guys are starting to slowly find their groove offensively. And, it was a tinfoil hat take of mine long ago about this team heating up when the weather truly heats up. And that's right about this time of the year, right? Late June, early July. Because you look at all the guys on this team, and who are the only guys that were hot other than of recent have been hot for extended periods of time? The 2 guys from the northern part of the United States, Ian Happ from Pittsburgh and Michael Busch from Minnesota. Now the rest of this group is starting to come along. Swanson's starting to hit. Suzuki's starting to hit. This offense is heating up with the weather. It was a hot week in Baltimore, and the bats were equally as hot for these Cubs. You absolutely love to see how things are going right now. And because of this sweep win, They're only 3 games back in the wild card. It's amazing how quickly the narrative can change from series to series the way things are going. But we have to address the elephant in the room here when we talk about the bats and the production, and that is the Cody Bellinger injury. Cody Bellinger is down for the count. He did fracture his left middle finger after being hit by the pitch on Wednesday night's game, pardon me. Ultimately left that game after staying in and remaining on base. They reveal he goes on the 10-day IL on Thursday. Alexander Canario gets called up to take his place on the roster, a guy that I hope we get to see a little bit of run of in the coming weeks. Obviously, the All-Star break keeps the Cubs at bay for at least 4 days, but certainly a guy that I would like to see after the All-Star break get a decent amount of starts, truly, whether it's as a DH, maybe it's as a right fielder if they want to DH Suzuki on any given day, just to give him a look and get an idea of what he is right now at this time, because he is a bat that if he runs into one or two, could really do a lot of good for these Cubs. I'm going to take a sip of this good stuff. But before I do, want to remind everybody, if you want to join the comment section, just like our incredible commenters tonight, like Hank and Darren and Tyler and, of course, Jeremiah, be sure to head over to the YouTube. You can comment from X, you can comment from Facebook, but one of the best places to do it is from our YouTube channel. Head over to OnTap Sportsnet on YouTube. Hit like us, subscribe, hit the bell button. You guys know the deal. You'll know when all of our great shows go live, just like us here at Cubs on Tap. I'm going to take a little celebratory sip here, and we're going to talk about this Cody Bellinger. All right, let's get into it. So Cody Bellinger's down for the count. I have a little bit of a hot take on this, and I don't know if this is going to upset people. I really don't. It could, but I don't know if it's going to upset people. Cody Bellinger is the team's 3-hitter, and he's not having a bad season. I mean, he's a well over a 700 OPS player. He's been hovering kind of in that like 750 to 780 range for most of the season. 37 runs driven in. But it feels like Cody Bellinger, I think some of those RBI numbers are largely just because guys haven't been getting out in front of him on base. But it feels like at times that maybe Cody Bellinger wasn't the guy they needed to be the 3-hitter. And what I mean by that is maybe Cody Bellinger's a guy that would benefit more from hitting in a 5-hole or in a 2-hole, like we've seen from an Ian Happ or Michael Busch. The 3-hole's a hard spot to hit in a lineup. And I don't think the Cubs have a true 3-hitter on this team. I think Ian Happ is a fine 4-5 hitter. I think Seiya Suzuki can be a 3-hitter in spurts. That's the one thing they're truly missing from this lineup. And for sake of now, right, Cody Bellinger was the best option to put at the 3-hole. I think with him being out of the 3-hole, first off, I think it forces the other bats to have to step up and continue this offensive production, which I think is going to be good for this team. But I think there were times where Bellinger's lack of power slug in that 3-hole this year maybe set the team back at times. And I know that might not be a popular take, but if you look at it, right, he's the only guy who has not been hitting for a lot of pop when it comes to home runs. Ian Happ's been on a power surge. Busch has come around and found the power again. Seiya Suzuki has been the same way. Cody Bellinger went games and games and games without a home run. It's still under 10 home runs. He hasn't even eclipsed the double figure mark yet. I'm wondering what the Cody Bellinger missing aspect will do to this lineup. Because I think now guys might settle into roles that before they might not have had. And I think Seiya Suzuki in the 3-hole might be really good for him at this point in time, right? I think an Ian Happ being in that 4-hole/5-hole could be good for him. I like Christopher Morel getting a different look in the 5-hole here tonight just to try to give him a different type of mojo. But I really think now with his absence, we're going to learn a lot about this team because last year, Bellinger largely carried this Cubs team. We all remember how hot he got in late June into July into August, and then Seiya Suzuki came behind him, and that largely carried this Cubs offense. Now we've got a hot Ian Happ. There's a hot Michael Busch. Seiya Suzuki is starting to heat up. maybe Dansby Swanson finally starts to hit a little bit more. And obviously, I think Dansby's better suited for the bottom half of the lineup, and that's totally fine. You can produce from the 6, 7, 8 hole. Now maybe they get a little bit more offensive production from PCA. And by offensive production, I mean just getting on base, homeboy. Get on base and use your speed as a weapon. Thomas Nido has been – who would have thought Thomas Nido would have been a refreshing player to add to this roster given his season and largely underwhelming numbers? It just showed how poor the catching position was for the Cubs this year. Continue to get a little bit out of Miles Mastrobuoni, who by all accounts has not been bad, and it's weird to say that. He's been kind of good. Offensively, he's been hitting fine in this recent little stretch. Obviously, it's just a handful of games, but he's played a really good defensive third base, which I think is the even more critical part of this, especially with no Nick Madrigal to play there. We know the struggles that Christopher Morel's had at the position. David Bodie is David Bodie. I'm really intrigued to see what the Bellinger absence does to the rest of the lineup, but I think him being out of that 3 hole could continue this hot stretch for the Cubs. And I think it's going to take them seeing that to understand that maybe he wasn't the best fit for the 3-hitter. Now, granted, I don't think anybody on this team is truly the best fit for the 3-hitter, but at the end of the day, he was the best option, so therefore he stayed there. I'm really intrigued to see now how that makes Seiya Suzuki change his approach being the 3-hitter. Maybe does Christopher Morel oddly get a look as a 3-hitter? I don't think he will, but that's Seiya Suzuki's spot now to hold down and show your worth. And this is a big spot for Seiya Suzuki because now he can prove, hey, I should be here. I am your $20 million a year guy. If you're going to move on from anybody, move on from Bellinger. Don't move on from me. We'll have to wait and see how that transpires. But the Cody Bellinger injury, they said best case scenario, he's going to be back circa the end of July, right around the trade deadline. Worst case scenario, he's not back till August. And I'm willing to bet it's going to be worst case scenario. I wouldn't personally expect Bellinger back until probably August 10th, we'll say. I believe they play the White Sox on August 11th. So we'll call it August 11th, I think is the first time you see Bellinger back in the lineup and off the IL. So hopefully also that means we get a decent dose of Alexander Canario. He pinch hit in Thursday's game, ultimately flew out to, I believe it was the center fielder, but it was to right center. Maybe we get to see a little extended run of him and what he can do over the course of a full few games. Pushing the right buttons. And this is going to tie back into some of the buyer talk and some of the other things here that the comment section has brought up over the course of the show. It feels like the team is finally truly pushing the right buttons now. It feels like Craig Counsell is pushing the right buttons as a manager, putting people in the right places to succeed. The pitching is arguably better than it's even been at all this season. Justin Steele looks healthy and back to his full form. Shota after a couple of, only one really rough start by his standards, but, still quality starts nonetheless. He's starting to, continue to look really, really, really strong. Jameson Taillon is continuing to look really, really strong. Javier Assad is likely going to pitch this weekend in this series against the Cardinals, as should Kyle Hendricks. This is the time now where they continue to push these right buttons. They will be buyers at the deadline. And I don't know how hard they're going to buy. I don't foresee them selling the future. What I would say is I could see them doing what we talked about on the last show with myself and Juice and Nick of we're going to go out and make a move, but we're going to go buy a guy for the core of this team to benefit just beyond more than just this season. I don't think it's going to be a Jeimer Candelario move. I think it's going to be something maybe bigger if they are active. Going to get that guy. Darren said it a little bit earlier, right? A third baseman with control. I think they're going to go out and try to get a guy with control at the deadline. And sure, maybe that means you do pay a little bit of a bigger price, especially because, there's going to be other teams that are probably competing for similar players in their services. But if this is a guy that the front office identifies that he fits with what they're trying to do, he can get the job done at the end of the day of what they need, I think it's very, very possible that comes to fruition at the deadline. Now, I do think they go buy a rental bullpen arm. I could see them buying another catcher as a rental piece as well. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see how they essentially conquer the deadline now because they got to continue playing good baseball. It doesn't end after this Baltimore series, right? I think we all want to sit here and proclaim the Cubs are back, and it does feel that way. They just beat one of the best teams in the American League. Coming into this series, this was the team with the best record in the American League, or at least one of the best records in the American League. But they still got to go out now this weekend, right? Take care of business against a division rival. If they win the Cardinals series, it's a whole different narrative coming out of the All-Star break. Because then you got 3 with the Diamondbacks, who are a good team, but they're not a great team. You've got another couple of games then with the Brewers, which is going to be a huge series. It's at Wrigley. Then you got an off day, pardon me, and a couple more winnable series on the horizon here as this calendar once again flips. We're going to take a quick look here at the schedule because I'm drawing a huge blank on the end of the schedule. You got the Royals, who are still a good baseball team, right? They're hanging on. They're in the wild card race in the AL. And then you got the Reds at the end of the month. But what happens if this Cubs team continues this hot streak throughout the rest of July? They're 100% buyers when the deadline comes and goes. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting. But I can't pound this drum enough, just as Darren says and reiterates here in the comments. They can trade for the now, but they also have to think about the future. And I think the best way for them to make a move at the deadline is making a move for a guy who is going to be in the cards beyond the end of 2024. A guy who is going to be at CubsCon in early 2025 because he's under control and under contract with his team beyond this season. I think that's the best way for them to improve because then you start to work that guy into the team. And that's a huge advantage then going into what should be an incredibly competitive 2025, right? We're seeing them still compete in 2024, but I think that'll make them an even more competitive team in 2025 if you're able to get that kind of player in the building sooner rather than later. And that's going to be so very important. Jeremiah said this a little bit earlier, but I did want to revisit it. He said Belly at leadoff would be interesting. That would be interesting. I wouldn't say it's impossible. I think they like Nico Horner in that position right now, but I would never say never. Especially if they just need to flip a switch and try something, right? We're talking about pushing the right buttons, and it seems like Craig is doing that. So I think Craig is going to continue to do that, and as long as he continues to do that, this team will be buyers. Their fate is largely unsolved now after this series, right? I think if they came out of this series losing 2 out of 3, I think Jed would be like, all right, we're going to start leaning seller. I think this would have been catastrophic with Bellinger's injury because you're like, wow, can we trade him now? You'd still be able to trade him, but you probably wouldn't get as much for him. It would really start to settle Jed into like okay, I know what we're going to do now type of attitude, where I don't think that's the case right now. I think because of this series now, Jed is more conflicted than ever in terms of what the direction of this team is now moving forward because without Bellinger, if they continue to win games, and this is an incredibly important point too, right? We mentioned some of the pitching that's coming back after the All-Star break. Merriweather, Killian, Mike Tauchman is also expected back after the All-Star break. If he's back and healthy, he's going to get run in the outfield. He's probably the guy that ends up replacing Canario on the roster, truthfully, when it's all said and done. He probably DHs a little bit. He probably plays some outfield a little bit. Then all of a sudden, if he's getting on base at that near 400 clip like he was before, what does that do to this team? Especially with Michael Busch hitting in the 2-hole, especially with Seiya hitting in the 3-hole, Happ potentially hitting in the 4-hole. Some of your hottest hitters hitting behind a guy who's getting on base at almost a 40% clip. That's going to make for crazy nonsense here coming up in the near future. Pardon me. Oh. When the weather doesn't know what it wants to do, ladies and gentlemen, Ron Luce's allergies go absolutely berserk. So I apologize for that. But let's keep this thing moving. And please, if you're still watching along, do comment here. Because I want to talk about one more thing here before we look ahead. We are at the 35-minute mark of the show. But I think the most impressive thing with this series is just how this team feels like it's starting to finally settle in. And what I mean by that is Craig Counsell, I think, finally knows his roster. right? Like it's one thing you come in spring training, you get a month to learn these guys. You don't really know what you have at your disposal until things start to settle, right? Like everybody's like, oh, the team that went out and made all the most changes and got better is the team that's going to be the best. Not necessarily. And a large reason for that is the cohesion that occurs from a lineup standpoint, a rotation standpoint, your manager's standpoint. I think we're starting to see that here a little bit now, and especially with the amount of injuries that they've been able to largely overcome. You've got tons and tons of these guys right now who are going to be, key contributors that have found their spot, right? Like Michael Bush is one of those guys. Ian Happ is one of those guys. Seiya Suzuki might be one of those guys. Miles Mastrobuoni, ironically, this last week plus of baseball has been a meaningful contributor. But if you continue to get the type of pitching that they've gotten, you continue to see this bullpen settle in a lot more over the course of the season now, shit's going to start humming. And if this team starts to hum, it's going to flip a lot of narratives that people have had about this season. Now, do I think they're a good enough team to go on and win the World Series? Who knows? And we learned that last year from the Diamondbacks going all the way to the World Series despite losing to the Texas Rangers. But let me remind you that the Texas Rangers were not the division winner in the AL West last year. they were a wild card team. They were the top wild card seed at number 4. You had 2 wild card teams playing in the World Series, with the team with the better record ultimately winning the whole thing. If the Cubs could add a little bit of slug, just to add on to these guys that are hitting home runs right now, like Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki and Christopher Morel and Michael Bush, could go a really, really, really long way. And like Jay says, Pete Alonso or Matt Chapman, they're rentals that you could control for a while. They are. If this is going to be where I think shit gets really weird over the next couple of weeks. Who's going to truly be sellers? I don't think we really know anybody that's truly a seller yet that isn't named the Colorado Rockies, Chicago White Sox, or Miami Marlins. Every other team, for the most part in baseball, is still kind of in it. Like the New York Mets are still kind of in it. The San Francisco Giants are still kind of in it. And as great as these guys would be as additions, right? We don't know if those teams are going to go out and buy or not, or sell, right? I'm looking at the NL wildcard picture right now in front of me. The New York Mets are a wildcard team right now, as of this very moment. So are they going to sell Pete Alonso? I don't know. Maybe they still will. That would be a crazy turn of events, but it's possible. Never going to say never. The Giants, they've gone on a little bit of a skid. They're tied with the Cubs right now at 45 and 49. But what if they continue to skid? Does a Matt Chapman become available? Who knows? There's going to be a lot of crazy, crazy stuff that occurs over the next couple of weeks. And it would be really, really nuts. And Scott's always doing the math, and I appreciate it. He says the Cubs now only need to go 9-5 for the rest of the month, and they can be buyers, because that gets you back to effectively 500 or a little above 500. And that's where stuff is starting to go. I agree with you, Brandon. Winning is fun. And Jim says here he's really happy about the series with the Orioles, but the next 4 against the Cardinals, yes, job's nudged, finished. And we are going to touch on the importance of this upcoming series here in just a moment. And one final quick comment here from Darren. He says, Talkman back platooning and mentoring PCA in center field. Bush left at first. A possible trade for a catcher / third baseman with control and one more bullpen arm would be helping the now and gearing up for 25. It certainly would be. And Jed Hoyer could largely keep his job based on how this deadline goes. Right? We heard from Juice on Monday night on the off day talking about how his seat's getting hot. If this team continued to slub and all they did was, bring in Craig Counsell, and, what if Counsell's not going to get the job done this season? Does that ultimately leave the door a little open for Jed Hoyer? Jed Hoyer's got an opportunity now to kind of put his money where his mouth is over these next couple of weeks, really. Because once the trade deadline comes, that's when he's absolutely going to set this team up for potentially the future. And ultimately, maybe his job, because he is only under contract through next season as of now. Obviously, that can change between now and the end of 2025, but He's going to have to make something happen and let that be the case. Scott says here quickly, Amaya has shortened his stride. He might be the guy. And I think that's credit to Craig Counsell. Got to listen to the radio one of these crazy weekends where I was doing a lot of driving out west here in the state of Illinois. And they talked about Amaya and him sitting, and Craig Counsell mentioned it. He said, hey, he knows he needs to be better. We need him to be better. And he let him sit for a few days because Nito at that time was catching for the third day in a row. And he said, we're just letting him work on stuff. He has no more options. So for everybody that's sending him to Iowa, you can't unless you want to DFA him. And then if he gets taken, you're shit out of luck at the catching position. But it seems like some with Amaya's click too. He's been really productive lately at the plate compared to where he was early in the season. And it'll be something to really, really, really see and kind of how things transpire over the coming days and potentially weeks. Whew. Take a deep breath. Take it all in. We are going to move and push forward. The sweep was fun. Kind of concluding thoughts from me here on this Baltimore series. The sweep was fun. This was a fun 3 days of baseball to watch this Cubs team. I'm probably more optimistic after a series. I haven't been more optimistic, pardon me, after a series to this point. It's not like they came in here and swept the Miami Marlins or swept the Colorado Rockies. No. They swept one of the best teams in the American League, a team that very well will probably win the AL East when it's all said and done, unless the Yankees get their head out of their ass. The Cubs took care of business against them. Great starting pitching, timely hitting, the long ball was working, a lot of really good shit, and the bullpen stood tall against a very dangerous Orioles lineup. Arguably a better lineup than they're going to see probably the rest of the month in terms of any of these teams they're going to face. So credit to the Cubbies. It was a lot of fun. But there's a big game on the horizon this weekend. And I know a few hinted at that here in the comment section. But next up is the shitbag St. Louis Cardinals. The Cubbies got to take care of business. It's 4-3 in case those forgot. That one makeup game from the end of May that got rained out when Shota was supposed to pitch, that has been rescheduled to this series. So we will see them play a ton of baseball against these Cardinals over the course of the weekend. Hank asks, has Hendricks been cleared to pitch tomorrow? I'd rather have Hayden pitch on the normal 4 days rest. Instead, Hendricks has been cleared to pitch tomorrow, and he is actually the current slated starter for the Cubs. The only probable of the next 2 days that they've already named, Tyone is slated to throw on Sunday on his normal rest. We will likely see Hayden Wesneski in one of those 2 games on Saturday. I bet you the other game we see Javier Assad because he is also in the works to be back in this series. So it'll probably be Assad in one of those 2 games. It'll be Wesneski in the other on Saturday. Hendricks will throw on Friday, and then we probably can expect to see Jamison Tyone on Sunday for these Cubbies. For the Redbirds, they do have their pitchers already named for the series coming up. Sonny Gray will throw on Friday. In game 1 on Saturday will be Lance Lynn. In game 2, it'll be Kyle Gibson. And then in game 4 of the series on Sunday against Jamison Tyone, it will be Miles Michaelis for the Redbirds. Take what you did in this 3-game series if you're the Chicago Cubs and just apply it to St. Louis. Busch Stadium is a ballpark you can hit homers at. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. I would expect it to probably be hotter than shit this weekend in St. Louis. Continue riding your stride. You played really well in Baltimore. It was hotter than hell, but you got good starting pitching and you hit the shit out of the baseball. Do that again. Do it again. And don't get intimidated. Yes, it's the Cardinals. Yes, these games are important, but every game at this stretch is important. You're playing for your playoff lives, your lives to be, a buyer rather than a seller at the deadline. Just go take care of business. Hopefully Kyle's healthy and he pitches well on Friday. You get good outings out of Wesneski, who had a great outing against the Angels, and Javier Assad on Saturday. And then Jamison Tyone, pick right where you left off after this Baltimore start, my friend, and go take care of business. And then you get to ride in the All-Star break. Shota's the only guy going to Texas. Everybody else gets 4 days of rest. Go relax, recoup, and we'll see you back in Chicago because then you open 3 games with the Diamondbacks at Wrigley starting on the 19th. That is where they're going to really start to hit their stride. And if they have a largely successful Cardinals series, this Cubs team is going to be in a great spot the rest of the month. But they got to take care of business this weekend. You got 3 division rivals on your calendar for the rest of the month. Starts here with the Cardinals for 4. You got the Brewers at Wrigley for 3, and then you're in Cincy for 3 to close out the month. You got a couple of bookends in there with the Royals and the Diamondbacks. But nothing is more important than these 4 games at Busch Stadium right now. Because if you go 3-1 in the next 4 games, and you're sitting at, what's their current record? 45-49. So if you win 3 and you lose 1, 48-50. Yeah, you're in a good spot going into the All-Star break, especially compared to where they were last year at this time. And it would be freaking awesome to see this team start to hit their stride and really look like a team that I think all of us expected them to be at the beginning of the year. Darren says here he wants to see Biggie throw some more 100-mile-per-hour heat. He also wants to be the first to nickname him the Big Easy. I like that. The Biggie, Big Easy. Hey, Biggie, can't you see? I hope he's tattooing Cardinals like that. And that would hypnotize me to believe in these Chicago Cubs. Yet, again, I know that was a really bad pun. I tried my best, folks. This was a fun show. It felt good to talk positive about Cubs baseball again. I'm excited for the weekend. A lot of good stuff coming up, both in my personal life. It's just going to be a fun weekend, and we're gonna be watching these Cubbies. It's a big series coming up, and I think they've got a really good, strong 4 pitching going. Kyle Hendricks maybe being the worst of that, but you're getting Assad back. You're getting healthier. You got guys that are coming back after the All-Star break. Imagine adding Killian's heat to this bullpen right now. Imagine adding, Merriweather to this bullpen right now. Talkman as another option again. Like Scott says here, this is a great way to send us out. Cubs can jump 3 teams in the wild card race tomorrow with a dub. 3 teams. 3 teams in the wild card race. And if that's the case, that they jump all 3 of those teams, that puts them right in a beautiful spot just behind the Padres, who are knocking on the doorstep as tied for the last wild card spot right now. This series was huge. They can get a little Biggie end of the bullpen going and keep this NL long win streak going at 4 games. Things could be going in a really good direction for the Cubbies. So final question here from Brandon B. Would you get an Imanaga All-Star jersey, home or blue? Like with the All-Star patch. I was trying to decipher that. Apologies. Well, they have the All-Star jerseys, don't they? I don't know if they wear them still in the game. I don't know. The All-Star game's gotten weird over the last couple of years. I have a blue Imanaga jersey for whatever that's worth. Don't ask me how I acquired it, but I have one. So I would tell you blue, but you can never go wrong with a home white either when it's all said and done. His All-Star jersey. Home or blue? Go blue. I think blue's fun. Blue's always a good time. I like the blue. To me, the blue's great, especially from a Cubs standpoint. The blue is fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get out of here, I do want to remind you guys, as always, Cubs on Tap is one of 2 official shows here covering your Chicago Cubs. Check out our friends over at the Dingers podcast. They were live on Tuesday night. Mitch and Jake had a great show on hand. You can find that replay right here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. You can also check that out wherever you listen to your favorite shows. You can find them on the socials at Dinger Cubs. You can make sure to follow us as well at Cubbies on Tap. I am at Loose on Tap. You know the drill. Follow the rest of the gang as well. Petty Freddy 270, Juice on Tap, Nick _ on Tap. Joey Knows Nothing, and our boy Bobby Foster, who will be making his watch-along debut after the All-Star break, and we will be bringing the watch-alongs back after the All-Star break as well. We wanted to do it this Orioles series. These early games were just a tough one to navigate, but we'll be back. We'll be back. The Brewers series right now is what we're teeing up to do, and then that Red series as well coming out of the break. Bobby Foster will make his Cubs on Tap debut. He is at silentbob_2 on the socials as well. You guys also know the drill. We got everything here at On Tap Sportsnet covering Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks. Now we're in the waiting period, but the team is largely set for the upcoming season. The Rockford Ice Hogs announced their schedule today. That's exciting stuff. If you follow the Blackhawks largely, the AHL is going to be fun for them this year with the number of talented prospects there as well. The Bulls have a big season of change coming up ahead of them as well. Be sure to follow the Four Feathers podcast and Bulls on Tap. And the next sport that's up on the calendar is the Bears. Be sure to follow the Bears on Tap, guys. They were live on Tuesday night as well with a guest talking a little bit about the NFC North division. It was a Detroit Lions guest this week, while the Vikings guest here in the not so distant future over at Bears on Tap. So be sure to check that out as well, because training camps are right around the corner, and we'll be starting up here in just a handful of days. And as always, Cubs fans, you have friends that like the Southsiders. Guess what? So do we. Send your friends to our friends. They can always be friends over at Sox on Tap. OnTapSportsNet.com and OnTap Sportsnet on the socials. The OnTap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Cubs win 3 in Baltimore. They break out the Brooms and get the sweep. Hopefully they ate some good crab cakes as well while they were there. Now it's off to St. Louis, the armpit of America, for 4 games with the Redbirds in the next 3 days. Saturday will be a day-night doubleheader from Busch Stadium. We will see you guys for our All-Star show next time out. That'll either be on Sunday or Monday of this coming weekend. It'll hopefully be the whole crew here with us as well, breaking down the first half pre-All-Star break. We'll probably talk a little bit about the MLB draft because that starts on Sunday as well. And we will also talk about Shota, the All-Star game, the Home Run Derby, all that fun stuff on that show as well. So do be sure to tune in with us. That will probably be a pretty long show as well. So be sure to bring yourself a little beverage. If you don't drink, you can also just bring whatever your favorite beverage to enjoy is, because we'll be on the airwaves for quite a while. So get comfy, find yourself a good spot in the house, and tune in with us here at Cubs on Tap. Until next time, I am Ron Luce. Let's go Cubbies. And more than ever, fuck the Cardinals.